I stood in Dominic Corsetti's private office with blood on my hands, not mine, not his, but blood all the same, and watched as he turned from the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city to look at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. My hands trembled. "I know, you could have been killed, Sophia." "I know that too." He took 3 steps toward me, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that reminded me of leather and smoke. "Then why?" I looked up at him. This man who terrified an entire city. This man who could end lives with a word. And I told him the truth. Because watching her suffer was worse than being afraid of you. 3 months earlier, the fluorescent lights in the emergency room waiting area buzzed like dying insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made my mother's skin look even paler than it already was. I sat beside her wheelchair, filling out forms I couldn't afford, making promises to pay bills I had no way of covering. "Sophia, you should go home," my mother whispered, her voice weak. "You have work in the morning." "I'm not leaving you here alone, Mama." She reached for my hand with fingers that felt like paper. 3 years of fighting cancer had stripped away everything soft about her, leaving only bone and determination. The doctor said she needed another round of treatment. The insurance company said they'd already paid enough. I was 24 years old, working 2 jobs, waitressing at a diner during the day and cleaning office buildings at night. And I still couldn't keep up. The medical bills piled higher than the stack of overdue notices on our kitchen table. Our landlord had started leaving notes on our door, each one more threatening than the last. "Miss Reyes," a nurse called from the doorway. I stood up, my legs stiff from hours of sitting. "Yes, we can admit her for tonight, but you'll need to speak with billing before she's discharged." Before she's discharged. As if that wasn't a threat in itself. I helped my mother into the room they assigned her. Small, sterile, with that particular hospital smell that never quite left her clothes and stayed until she fell asleep. Then I walked the 6 blocks to our apartment because I couldn't afford the bus fare, let alone a taxi. The streets were dark and dangerous at this hour. But I'd learned which alleys to avoid, which corners belonged to which gangs, how to keep my head down and my steps quick. This neighborhood wasn't where people came to thrive, it was where they came to survive, or to disappear. Our building was 5 stories of crumbling brick and broken dreams. The elevator hadn't worked in 2 years. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, my feet aching in shoes that needed to be replaced months ago, and let myself into the apartment I'd shared with my mother since my father died when I was 16. The single room served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen all at once. I'd gotten good at ignoring how small it was, how the pipes rattled in winter, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. Home was where my mother was. Everything else was just details. I set my alarm for 5 hours from now and collapsed onto the worn couch that doubled as my bed. Sleep came in fragments, broken by sirens and shouting from the street below, by anxiety that crawled through my dreams like spiders, by the constant weight of knowing that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. The restaurant job ended exactly 3 weeks later. "You're fired," my manager said, not even looking up from his clipboard. Tony Merschelli was a small man with mean eyes and wandering hands, and I'd been dodging both for 8 months. "What? Why?" "You dropped a plate last Tuesday," customer complained. "I don't need careless servers. I dropped 1 plate in 8 months of perfect service." "Tony, please, I need this job. My mother should have thought about that before you got sloppy." His eyes traveled over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Course, if you wanted to be more friendly, I might reconsider." My stomach turned. I knew what he was offering. I'd known for months that this moment was coming, had felt it in every inappropriate comment, every time he'd found an excuse to brush against me in the narrow kitchen. "No," I said. He shrugged. "Then clear out your locker." I walked out of that diner with $83 in tips, no job, and the knowledge that I'd just made our impossible situation even worse. The cleaning job barely paid minimum wage. It wasn't enough to cover rent, let alone food, utilities, and medical bills. I spent the next 2 days applying everywhere: grocery stores, fast food chains, retail shops, but no one was hiring. or they took one look at my address and found a reason to pass. Desperation has a taste. It's bitter and metallic, like blood in your mouth. On the third day, I saw the posting on a coffee shop bulletin board. Immediate opening, hotel housekeeping, competitive pay. The Corsetti Grand Hotel. The Corsetti Grand was the most expensive hotel in the city. The kind of place where politicians and celebrities stayed. Where a single night's room rate could cover a month of my rent. I'd walked past it 100 times but never imagined going inside. I called the number on the posting with my last dollar's worth of phone credit. The woman who answered had a crisp, professional voice. Housekeeping department, this is Mrs. Chen. I'm calling about the job posting? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Can you start tomorrow? Yes, absolutely. 6 a.m. sharp, employee entrance on Lexington. Ask for me. Entrance on Lexington. Ask for me. She hung up before I could say thank you. I showed up at 5:30 the next morning, terrified of being late. The employee entrance was a plain steel door tucked between the hotel's ornate main entrance and the loading dock. I knocked, and an older Asian woman with steel gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, opened it. "Sophia Reyes?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She looked me over with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You ever worked hotel housekeeping before?" "No, ma'am. But I'm a hard worker. I won't let you down." Something in my face must have convinced her because she nodded once. "Come. I'll show you what to do." Mrs. Chen ran the housekeeping department like a general commanding an army. She was strict but fair, expecting perfection but willing to teach. The work was back-breaking, changing linens, scrubbing bathrooms, vacuuming, dusting, restocking, but it paid $3 more per hour than my old cleaning job, and she didn't leer at me or make comments about my body. For the first 2 weeks, I kept my head down and worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I learned which guests tip well and which ones left their rooms looking like crime scenes. I learned the hierarchy among the staff, who to avoid and who might cover for you if you needed 5 minutes to catch your breath. And I learned that the top 3 floors of the hotel belonged exclusively to Dominic Corsetti. Everyone whispered about him. The bellhops fell silent when his name came up. The other maids crossed themselves and hurried away if they saw him in the hallways. Even Mrs. Chen, who seemed afraid of nothing, got a tight look around her eyes when she mentioned him. "Mr. Herperfune, Corsetti owns this hotel and half the city," she told me during my second week. "You stay out of his way. You never speak to him unless spoken to. You never, ever gossip about what you might see or hear on his floors. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "I mean it, Sophia. Women who cross Dominic Corsetti don't do well in this city. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Dominic Corsetti was the king of the East Side, the man who controlled the docks, the gambling, the protection rackets, the construction unions. Politicians feared him. Police couldn't touch him. His empire was built on violence and fear, wrapped in expensive suits and legitimate business fronts, and he lived in the penthouse of this hotel. In a world so far above mine that we might as well have existed on different planets. I had no intention of ever meeting him, but fate, I was learning, didn't care much about my intentions. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into my employment. I was assigned to the 18th floor, not quite Corsetti's private domain, but close enough that only senior staff usually worked there. Mrs. Halipet. Chen had called in sick, and the supervisor didn't know me well enough to realize I shouldn't have been sent up there alone. The 18th floor was different from the rest of the hotel. Quieter. The carpets were thicker, the artwork more expensive. The very air seemed to carry weight. I pushed my cleaning cart down the hallway, checking my assignment sheet. Rooms 1804 through 1812. All empty according to the system. I started with 1804, going through my routine on autopilot. Strip the bed, replace linens, scrub bathroom, vacuum, dust, restock toiletries. Each room took me about 30 minutes if I worked fast. I was finishing 1809 when I heard voices in the hallway, angry voices. One male and one female. "Please," the woman was saying, her accent thick. "Please, I didn't know. I didn't mean. You're a thief." The male voice was cold, precise. We don't tolerate thieves. I should have stayed in the room. I should have closed the door and minded my own business, but something in the woman's voice, the raw terror in it, made me crack the door open just enough to see. A young maid, couldn't have been more than 19, was backed against the wall by a man in an expensive suit. She was crying, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands shaking as she held out a small bottle perfume, I realized. One of the luxury amenity bottles from the guest rooms. I have a daughter, she sobbed. Her birthday. I just wanted to give her something nice. Please, Mr. Marino, I'll pay for it. I'll work extra shifts, just don't fire me. I can't lose this job. The man Marino smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, you're losing more than the job, sweetheart. Mr. Corsetti has a strict policy about theft. You know what happens to thieves on his property? The girl's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, still clutching the perfume bottle like it could save her. No. No, please. I'll do anything. Anything. Marino crouched down, his voice dropping to something ugly. Well, now. That changes things, doesn't it? My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I knew what was happening. I'd seen men like Marino before, men who used their power like a weapon, who enjoyed watching people beg. The smart thing would have been to close the door, to pretend I'd seen nothing. I pushed the cart into the hallway instead. Excuse me, I said, my voice somehow steady despite the fear racing through my veins. I need to get past. Marino straightened up, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. This doesn't concern you. I'm just trying to do my job. I moved forward with the cart, positioning myself between him and the girl. Mrs. Chen will have my head if I don't finish this floor by noon. Then come back in 10 minutes. Can't. She's checking my work today. I looked down at the girl, meeting her terrified eyes. You okay? You look sick. Maybe you should go to the break room, get some water. The girl stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Marino's face darkened. I said, he repeated, each word sharp as a knife, this doesn't concern you. And I said I need to get past. I kept my voice polite, professional, as if I couldn't feel the danger radiating off him like heat. So either move or tell Mrs. Chen why I'm behind schedule. For a long moment, he just looked at me. And I knew I just made a terrible mistake. But I couldn't take it back now. The girl was already scrambling to her feet, using my distraction to edge toward the stairwell. What's your name? Marino asked softly. Sophia Reyes. Sophia Reyes, he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. I'm going to remember that. Great. Now can I please do my job? The girl reached the stairwell door and disappeared through it. Marino watched her go, then turned back to me with a smile that made my blood run cold. You have no idea what you just did, he said. Then he walked away, his footsteps silent on the expensive carpet. I stood there for a full minute, shaking, before I could move the cart forward. My hands trembled as I unlocked the next room. I'd just made an enemy. Possibly ruined my job. Definitely put myself on someone's radar in the worst possible way. But the girl had gotten away. That had to count for something. I finished the floor in record time and hurried back downstairs, praying that Mrs. Chen would be back tomorrow, that maybe this whole thing would blow over, that Marino would forget about me. I should have known better. The next morning, I arrived at work to find Mrs. Chen waiting by the employee entrance, her face grave. Mr. Corsetti wants to see you, she said quietly. My stomach dropped. What? 18th floor. Penthouse elevator. He's expecting you now. Mrs. Chen, I don't. Go. Her eyes were sad. And Sophia, whatever happens, remember that you did the right thing yesterday. That was when I knew I was in real trouble. The elevator to the penthouse required a keycard. A security guard gave me one, his face carefully blank, and told me which button to press. The ride up felt like it lasted forever, and no time at all. The doors opened directly into a private foyer, all marble and modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stood waiting. Miss Reyes? His voice was cultured, educated. I'm Vincent, Mr. Corsetti's assistant. Follow me, please. We walk through rooms that looked more like a museum than someone's home. Sleek furniture, expensive paintings, silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Vincent knocked on a heavy wooden door, then opened it. Miss Reyes, sir. Send her in. That voice. Deep, calm, with an edge of authority that made it clear he was used to being obeyed. I stepped into the office. Dominic Corsetti stood with his back to me, looking out at the city through windows that turned the morning light into gold. He was taller than I'd expected, broad-shouldered in a way that suggested real strength, not just gym membership. Dark hair, cut short. When he turned to face me, I understood why people were afraid of him. He had the kind of face that belonged on Roman coins, all sharp angles and hard lines, with dark eyes that seemed to see straight through whatever mask you tried to wear. He was maybe 35. Handsome in a brutal way that had nothing to do with prettiness and everything to do with power. Miss Reyes, he said. Sit. It wasn't a request. I sat in the chair across from his desk, trying to keep my hands still in my lap, trying to breathe normally. He moved around the desk with the grace of a predator. Unhurried, confident. He didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the desk, his arms crossed, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Do you know who I am? He asked. Yes, sir. Then you know what I'm capable of. Yes, sir. Good. He tilted his head slightly. Tell me what happened yesterday on the 18th floor. I swallowed hard. A maid took a bottle of perfume. Your man caught her. I needed to get past with my cart. That's all. That's all. His eyes narrowed. Anthony Marino says you deliberately interfered with hotel security, that you helped a thief escape consequences, that you showed him disrespect in front of an employee. My mouth went dry. I just needed to do my job, Mr. Corsetti. You're lying. No, You positioned yourself between Marino and that girl deliberately. You gave her time to escape. You challenged his authority. He leaned forward slightly. Why? The honest answer sat in my throat like a stone. Because he was going to hurt her. Because I've seen men like him before. Because someone had to. But saying that would be admitting I knew exactly what I'd done, that it hadn't been innocent at all. I don't know what you mean, I whispered. Dominic Corsetti studied me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. You're afraid of me, he said slowly. But you're not sorry. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The girl's name is Anna Martinez. She has a 6-year-old daughter. Her husband left her 2 years ago. She sends money to her family in Colombia every month. He straightened up. She stole a $50 bottle of perfume. My policy is clear. Theft means termination and criminal charges. My chest tightened. She was desperate. So she should be allowed to steal from me? No, but... I stopped, realizing I was making it worse. But what, Miss Reyes? But maybe she deserved mercy, I said quietly. Maybe we all do, sometimes. The silence that followed felt like it might crush me. Dominic Corsetti's face was unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Then he moved back around his desk, pulled open a drawer, and took out a file. He dropped it in front of me. Sofia Maria Reyes, 24 years old. Mother in St. Mary's Hospital with stage 3 cancer. Father deceased. No siblings. Currently 3 months behind on rent. 2 months behind on utilities. Medical debt approximately $87,000, and climbing. Dropped out of college after 1 year to care for your mother. He closed the file. You're drowning, Miss Reyes, and yet you risked your job, risked everything for a stranger. I stared at the file, at the neat summary of my entire failing life, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. How do... I know everything that happens in my hotel. In my city. He sat down, his movements precise. Anna Martinez is fired. But I won't press charges. She'll find that an anonymous donation has covered her daughter's birthday and next month's rent. I looked up at him, confused. You, however, present a different problem. His fingers drummed once on the desk. You're smart enough to see what Marino was really doing. Brave enough or stupid enough to stop it. And moral enough to risk yourself for someone else. He leaned back in his chair. I can't have you working regular housekeeping anymore. You've seen too much. Marino won't forget what you did. My blood ran cold. Are you firing me? No. He paused. I'm offering you a different job. What kind of job? You'll work for me directly. Private quarters. Better pay enough to cover your mother's treatment and then some. Full medical benefits. Protection. It sounded too good to be true. Which meant it was. Why would you do that? I asked carefully. Because someone who intervenes when they see cruelty knowing the cost. That's rare. Especially in my world. His eyes held mine, and because I'm a businessman, Miss Reyes, I recognize value when I see it. What would I have to do? Clean my private residence, manage the household staff, keep my secrets. His voice dropped. Do exactly as I tell you when I tell you without question. The weight of those last words settled over me like a chain. And if I say no, then you'll be escorted out of this building with severance pay and a good reference. But no protection, and Marino doesn't forget. It wasn't really a choice. We both knew it. I thought of my mother in that hospital bed, of the bills I couldn't pay, of coming home to eviction notices and past due warnings. I thought of the darkness I'd been drowning in for 3 years, and the lifeline being offered by the most dangerous man in the city. How much? I asked. He named a number that made my head spin. It was more than I'd made in the year at both my old jobs combined. When do I start? Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Now, for the next month, I lived in a world I'd only ever seen from the outside. Dominic Corsetti's private residence took up the entire top floor of the hotel, a sprawling space of modern luxury that felt more like a fortress than a home. He had a chef, a driver, security staff that rotated in 8-hour shifts, and now he had me. My job, as it turned out, was exactly what he'd said. Managing his household. I coordinated with the chef, oversaw the cleaning staff for his quarters, handled his dry cleaning, made sure fresh flowers appeared in the main rooms every 3 days, and essentially anticipated his needs before he knew he had them. It was exhausting and demanding, and it paid for my mother's next round of chemotherapy without me having to think twice. He'd also moved me out of my old apartment, a decision made without consulting me. I'd come home from my first day to find my things packed and a moving crew waiting. Mr. Corsetti has arranged accommodation for you in the hotel, Vincent had explained. Employee housing, 20th floor. It's part of your compensation package. The employee housing turned out to be a 1-bedroom suite nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived. Clean, safe, with a real kitchen and a bathroom where everything worked. I'd stood in the middle of it and cried for 20 minutes. I saw Dominic most mornings. He kept irregular hours, disappearing for days sometimes, then reappearing without explanation. When he was in residence, I made sure his coffee was ready at 6 a.m., his newspapers arranged on the breakfast table, his schedule printed and waiting. We didn't talk much at first. He'd nod his thanks, ask brief questions about household matters, and that was it. But I watched him. I couldn't help it. I watched how he was patient with his elderly chef, who'd worked for his family for 30 years. How he never raised his voice to his staff, even when something went wrong. How he read 3 newspapers every morning, making notes in the margins with a silver pen. I watched the way men reacted when they came to meet with him, the fear in their eyes, the careful way they spoke, the relief when meetings ended and they could leave. I watched him take a phone call one morning, his face going absolutely still as he listened to someone report what sounded like a betrayal. He'd ended the call, sat in silence for 60 seconds, then made another call. His voice had been calm, almost gentle, as he ordered someone's death. He looked up afterward to find me standing frozen in the doorway with fresh coffee, and our eyes had met for a moment. I'd seen something flicker in his expression, acknowledgement maybe, or warning. Then it was gone. Thank you, Sophia, he'd said quietly, taking the coffee. I'd nodded and left, my hands shaking. That night, I'd lain awake in my comfortable bed in my safe room and tried to reconcile what I knew about Dominic Corsetti with what I felt. Because, and this was the terrifying part, I didn't feel afraid of him, not the way I should have. 3 weeks into my employment, my mother came home from the hospital in full remission. "It's a miracle," she kept saying, tears streaming down her face. The doctors said they'd never seen someone respond so quickly to treatment. It wasn't a miracle. It was whatever Dominic had done to expedite her care, to make sure she got the best doctors, the newest medications, the kind of attention that money and power could buy. I tried to thank him the next morning. He'd waved it away. "Your mother is no use to me sick," he'd said, not looking up from his newspaper. Healthy employees are more productive. But I'd seen his eyes when he said it. I'd seen the way his jaw tightened, the tiny tell that meant he was lying. Dominic Corsetti had saved my mother's life, and he didn't want me to know it was a kindness. The 4th week changed everything. I'd been working in his study, organizing files, when I overheard a conversation from his office. The door was slightly ajar, something that never happened unless he wanted it that way, and voices drifted through. "The shipment arrives Thursday," an unfamiliar voice said. "Marino says we're clear with the Port Authority. Marino's been making mistakes lately." That was Dominic, his voice cool. "I don't trust his judgment anymore. He's been with you for 5 years, Dom. He's loyal." Loyal? A pause. Or ambitious. I should have left, but something in his tone made me stay, and I listened as they discussed shipping routes, payoffs, and names I didn't recognize. And then, we should talk about the girl. The one who embarrassed Marino last month. My blood went cold. "Sophia, what about her?" "Marino's been asking questions, making noise about disrespect. Some of the guys think you're going soft, keeping her around after she defied one of your captains." "Anthony Marino is not a captain. He's an enforcer. And if he has a problem with my decisions, he's welcome to raise them with me directly. I'm just saying, people are talking. Then perhaps people should remember what happens when they talk too much." The temperature in his voice dropped 20 degrees. "Sophia stays. End of discussion." Footsteps approached the door. I barely made it back to the files before Dominic's guest emerged. A lean man with silver-shot hair and cold eyes who looked me over like I was something he might need to step on later. After he left, I worked in silence, my heart pounding until Dominic called my name. "Sophia, come here." I walked into his office. He was standing by the window again, his usual position, backlit by the afternoon sun. "How much did you hear?" he asked without preamble. "Enough to know I'm causing problems for you." He turned to face me. "That's not an answer." "Shipping schedules. Port Authority. Anthony Marino." I met his eyes. "You saved my life, and now people think you're weak because of it. And does that frighten you?" "Yes, but not in the way you mean." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Explain." "I'm afraid I'll get you killed," I said quietly. "I'm afraid that one day someone will use me to hurt you, and it will be my fault because I couldn't just mind my own business on the 18th floor." For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he crossed the room in 3 steps and stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back to see his face. "Let me be very clear, Sophia. You will not get me killed. You will not be used against me, because anyone who tries will learn exactly why I own this city." His voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "You're under my protection. That means something. Do you understand?" "I understand that protection comes with a price." "Yes, it does." His eyes searched my face. "Are you willing to pay it?" "I don't know what you're asking. I'm asking if you're with me, really with me. Not just working for a paycheck, but committed, loyal." He paused. "I'm asking if you trust me." I thought about my mother, healthy for the first time in years. About the apartment I could walk into without fear. About the way he'd dismissed Marino's complaints without hesitation. The way he'd defended me to his own people. I thought about the man who ordered deaths over breakfast and saved my mother's life in the same breath. "I trust you," I whispered. Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction, or relief, or something else I couldn't name. "Good," he said, "because everything's about to get much worse." He was right. 2 days later, Dominic left for a meeting at one of his nightclubs. He took Vincent and his usual security detail, leaving me alone in the penthouse with instructions to review some household accounts. I was at his desk, working through vendor invoices, when I heard the elevator doors open. No one should have been able to access this floor without the keycard. Only Dominic's most trusted people had them. Footsteps in the foyer. Multiple people. I stood up slowly, my heart starting to race, and moved toward the office door. Anthony Marino walked in, flanked by 2 men I recognized from Dominic's security rotation. All 3 were armed. "Sophia," Marino said, smiling that cold smile I remembered. "Working late?" "Mr. Corsetti will be back soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, he won't. He's about halfway to the docks right now, where a very unfortunate accident is about to happen. By the time anyone realizes, it'll be too late." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "Your boyfriend's empire is changing hands tonight." He walked further into the room. "And loose ends need to be tied up. You're a loose end, sweetheart. The girl who embarrassed Anthony Marino. Can't have that story floating around once I'm in charge." One of the men closed the door behind them, the other moved to block the window exit. I was trapped. "Dominic will kill you for this," I said. "Dominic will be too dead to care." Marino pulled out his phone, typed something, then showed me the screen. "See? Just sent the signal. Right now, 20 men loyal to me are moving on that club. He won't see it coming." The message was simple, now. My mind raced. If Marino had just triggered the attack, that meant Dominic didn't know yet. Didn't know he was walking into a trap. The security detail with him might be compromised. These 2 men with Marino right now were supposed to be his protection. I had maybe minutes to do something. But what? I had no phone, it was in my apartment. No weapon. I had no phone, it was in my apartment. No weapon, no training, nothing except the knowledge of what was about to happen, and the memory of Dominic's voice. "You're under my protection, that means something. You know what happens now, don't you?" Marino was saying, moving closer. "I can make it quick. Or I can take my time. Pay you back for every ounce of disrespect. Your choice." I looked at him, at the 2 men flanking him, at the office around me filled with Dominic's things. Then I grabbed the heavy crystal paperweight from the desk and threw it through the floor-to-ceiling window. The glass exploded outward in a spray of glittering shards. Cold air rushed in. Alarms shrieked to life, not from the hotel fire system, but from Dominic's private security, break glass alarms that connected directly to his personal detail in every safe house in the city. "You bitch," Marino lunged for me. I dodged, grabbed another paperweight, and threw it at the nearest man. It caught him in the face, and he went down hard. The second man raised his gun, but I was already moving, knocking over furniture, making myself a difficult target. Buying seconds. The elevator doors opened. Men poured out. Not Marino's men, but others, ones I recognized from Dominic's morning security briefings. Gunfire, shouting. Marino screaming orders. I dove behind the desk as bullets punched through expensive art and shattered sculptures. My ears rang. Something hot grazed my arm, and I looked down to see blood spreading across my sleeve. Then silence. I stayed crouched behind the desk, breathing hard, until a familiar voice called out, "Sophia? Sophia, you can come out." I stood slowly. The office was destroyed. 2 bodies on the floor. Marino's men. Marino himself was on his knees, being held by 3 security guards, blood running from his nose. Vincent stood in the doorway, his usually immaculate suit torn, his face grim. "Mr. Corsetti is on his way back. Are you hurt?" I looked down at my arm. "It's just a graze." The alarm worked. Vincent's voice was carefully neutral. Very clever, breaking the window. "Is he?" My voice cracked. "Did they get to him at the club?" "No. The alarm stopped him before he walked into the trap. He's safe." Vincent looked at Marino. "Thanks to you." The next 20 minutes blurred. Medics appeared to bandage my arm. Security swept the entire floor. Vincent made phone calls in quiet, clipped tones. And then Dominic walked through the door. He took in the destroyed office, the bodies being removed, the broken window. His eyes found me sitting on the couch with a bandage on my arm and something terrible flickered across his face, rage or fear or both. He crossed to me in 3 strides, crouched down, took my face in his hands. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough. "I'm okay. Your arm is bleeding. It's just a scratch." "I'm okay. Your arm is bleeding. It's just a scratch." "I'm okay. You're okay. That's what matters." His jaw tightened. Then he stood, turned to Marino, and pulled a gun from his jacket. "Wait," I said, standing. "Wait." Dominic didn't look at me. "This doesn't concern you, Sophia." "Yes, it does. He came here because of me. Because I embarrassed him. He came here because he's ambitious and stupid. Because he thought he could take what's mine." The gun didn't waver. "This is my business. Then let me help you finish it." That made him turn. "What? You said I was with you. Really with you. Committed." I stepped closer. "So let me prove it. Let me show everyone in your organization what happens to people who threaten you, to people who threaten us." His eyes searched my face. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do. Sophia, he tried to have you killed. He tried to kill me. And he's going to die anyway." My voice steadied. "So let it mean something. Let everyone see that I'm not a weakness, that I'm part of your strength." For a long moment, Dominic just looked at me. Then he handed me the gun. It was heavier than I expected. Cold. Monstrous in its simplicity. I walked over to Marino, who was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "You wanted to teach me a lesson," I said quietly. "You wanted to need to know my place, to understand how the world works. Please," he whispered. "Please, I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "You're right. I won't." I raised the gun, my hand surprisingly steady, and looked him in the eyes as I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the destroyed office. Marino crumpled. I stood there for a moment, the gun still raised, watching the life drain out of the man who tried to kill us both. Then I turned and handed the weapon back to Dominic. "It's done," I said. He took the gun, his eyes never leaving my face. "Vincent, clear the room." The security team filed out silently, taking the bodies with them. Vincent closed the door behind them. We stood in the ruined office, just the 2 of us, in the space where I'd just crossed a line. I could never uncross. "You shouldn't have done that," Dominic said quietly, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "I know. You could have been killed, Sophia. I know that too." He took 3 steps toward me, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that reminded me of leather and smoke. "Then why?" I looked up at him, this man who terrified an entire city, this man who could end lives with a word, and I told him the truth. "Because watching her suffer was worse than being afraid of you." Wait, no, that wasn't right. That was where the story had started, not where it ended. I looked up at him and told the real truth. Because I've spent my whole life watching powerful people hurt the weak, and I'm tired of being weak. I'm tired of being afraid. You offered me protection, but what I really want is to never need protecting again. His hand came up, fingers gentle as they brushed the hair back from my face. "You understand what this means. What you've become. Yes. You can't go back. Once you cross this line, I don't want to go back." My voice was steady. The world where I couldn't afford my mother's medicine, where men like Marino could threaten me and I had to just take it, where being good and moral meant drowning in debt and fear. I don't want that world anymore. This world is worse. Maybe. But in this world, I'm standing. In this world, I matter. In this world, the people I care about are safe. I paused. In this world, I have you. Something changed in his expression, the careful control slipping just enough for me to see what was underneath. Hunger, possessiveness. Something darker and deeper that had been building for weeks. You have me, he repeated softly. Do you understand what that means, Sophia? What I am? You're a monster who saved my mother's life, who treats his staff with respect, who values loyalty above everything. I stepped closer. You're the most dangerous man in the city, and you make me feel safe. So yes, Dominic, I understand exactly what you are. And you're not afraid? I'm terrified, I whispered. But not of you. His thumb traced my jaw, tilted my face up. What are you afraid of? That this feeling isn't real. That I'm confusing gratitude with something else. That 3 months from now, I'll wake up and realize I've become someone I don't recognize. And if it is real? His face was so close I could feel his breath. If 3 months from now you still feel exactly the same, what then? Then I guess we'll figure out what comes next. He kissed me like a man claiming something precious, something worth protecting, something that had already cost him more than he'd planned to pay. His hands cupped my face, careful of my injured arm, and I kissed him back with everything I had, all the fear and gratitude and need and hope that had been building since the morning he'd offered me this impossible choice. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Everything changes now, he said. I know. People will talk. They'll say you have too much influence, that you're making me weak. Let them. They'll try to use you against me, to hurt you, to hurt me. They can try. He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching my face. You're not supposed to be this brave, Sophia Reyes. You were supposed to be a simple girl who needed saving. And you were supposed to be a simple monster, I countered. Guess we're both more complicated than we planned. His lips curved in something that might have been a smile. The first real one I'd ever seen from him. Come on. Let's get you properly cleaned up. And tomorrow, we start teaching you how to use that gun. You're going to train me. If you're going to kill for me, you're going to do it properly. He took my uninjured hand, lacing his fingers through mine. Welcome to my world, Sophia. Try not to drown. I squeezed his hand. I've been drowning my whole life, Dominic. This is the first time I felt like I could breathe. 3 weeks later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out over the city that had once seemed so overwhelming and impossible. My mother was in full remission, living in a secure apartment in a good neighborhood. My old debts were paid. Anna Martinez, the maid I protected, had been quietly relocated to a better job in one of Dominic's legitimate businesses, with a raise and proper benefits. And I was no longer the girl who cleaned rooms and kept her head down. I was Sophia Reyes, right hand to Dominic Corsetti, the woman who'd exposed a coup, saved his life, and killed a traitor without hesitation. Some people whispered that I was his weakness. Others said I was his conscience. A few suggested I was something darker, the good girl who'd fallen so far she'd become a monster herself. I didn't care what they said, because, in the end, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the only way to survive drowning is to learn how to swim in dark waters. Dominic came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. About the girl I used to be, the one who would have been horrified by everything I've done. Do you regret it? I thought about that question, really thought about it. Did I regret crossing lines I'd once thought were uncrossable? Did I regret becoming someone I never imagined I could be? No, I said finally. I regret that the world is the way it is, that good people suffer while bad people prosper, that mercy is seen as weakness and morality as foolishness. I turned in his arms to face him, but I don't regret choosing to survive. And I don't regret choosing you. He kissed my forehead, gentle despite all the violence those hands were capable of. You're mine now, Sophia, in every way that matters. I know, and I'm yours. Which means anyone who threatens you threatens me. Anyone who hurts you signs their own death warrant. That's very romantic, I said dryly. I'm a crime boss, not a poet. Lucky for you, I prefer actions to words. His arms tightened around me. The world we live in, it's not kind. It's not fair. It won't forgive mistakes. I know that too. But as long as you're with me, you'll never drown again. I promise you that. I believed him, not because he was good Dominic Corsetti, was many things, but good wasn't one of them. I believed him because I'd seen the ruthless determination in his eyes, the absolute conviction that what was his would be protected at any cost. And somehow, impossibly, I had become his. "I'm going to hold you to that promise," I told him. "Good," he said. "I'm counting on it." Below us, the city glittered in the darkness, full of people drowning in their own ways, fighting their own battles against an indifferent world. I'd been one of them once, but not anymore. Now I stood above it all, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city, and I finally understood what it meant to be safe. Not because I was protected, but because I'd become dangerous too.